He just wanted someone to take care of the tent, but found an entire family by the riverside. The widow, exhausted and humiliated, was feeding the children corn scraps. The Apache watched her in silence until he extended his hand and offered shelter. What was born from this simple gesture changed everyone's destiny. Subscribe to the channel and discover how a new family can emerge where there was only rejection. On the banks of the Solimois River, hidden between the dense forest and the darkness of early dawn, Josefa huddled against fallen tree trunks, her face, marked by the relentless sun and the sunken eyes of someone who hadn't slept for days, revealed her story. At only 25, she already carried the burden of being a widow and mother to two boys who didn't share the same paternal blood. Tomas, 5 years old, slept curled up under the only blanket she had managed to bring during their escape. Lucas, just 2 years old, sucked on a piece of cassava softened in water, the only way she had found to calm the child's hunger. The community of Santa Rosa de Purus, where she was born and raised, now denied her shelter. "Wretched woman who stains our land with her fatherless children," shouted the merchant, Mr. Geronimo, as he threw her belongings out of the small house she rented. No one interfered. The priest lowered his eyes, the women turned their faces away. 3 days of walking through the forest, guided only by the course of the river and her survival instinct, had brought her here, to an unknown stretch where the waters widened to form a small natural bay. The darkness of night was beginning to yield, and the first rays of light illuminated the opposite bank. That's when she saw the canoe and the man paddling it. He was tall, with copper-colored skin and black hair that fell to his shoulders. He wore only worn shorts and carried a bundle of bamboo on his back. Josefa instinctively pulled the boys closer, hiding among the foliage. But Lucas's stomach growled loudly, and the man turned his face in their direction. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither moved. He then tied up his canoe, jumped to the shore, and continued his work, cutting more bamboo as if he hadn't seen her. Josefa remained motionless, watching. There was something about this man's calmness that intrigued her. When the sun was high, he gathered his materials, placed them in the canoe, and crossed back over the river. He disappeared among the trees on the opposite bank. The next morning, as Josefa tried to light a small fire to roast the roots she had found, she saw the canoe again. This time, the man brought the vessel to her bank. He descended with smooth movements, carrying a package wrapped in banana leaves. He stopped a few meters from her. "Food," he said in Portuguese with a heavy accent. "4 children." And he left the package on the ground, moving away afterward. Inside was smoked fish and cassava flour. The boys devoured everything, while Josefa observed the man, who was now cutting bamboo nearby. On the 3rd day, fever struck Lucas. The boy shook, sweated, his eyes rolling back. Josefa desperately immersed him in the cold river water. That's when the man appeared again. Without asking permission, he took the boy in his arms, gestured for her to follow, and walked to the canoe. "Village. Shaman heals," he said simply. Josefa hesitated for a second, looking at the dense forest surrounding her, at her older son who stared at her with frightened eyes, at the younger one burning with fever in the stranger's arms. There was no choice. She took Tomas by the hand and entered the canoe. The man paddled with strength and precision. The crossing took only a few minutes, but to Josefa it seemed like an eternity. On the other bank, a narrow trail led into the forest. After half an hour of walking, they spotted the first huts of the Ticuna village. Josefa's heart raced as she saw the curious looks following her. Women interrupted their tasks. Children ran to see. Men rose from their hammocks. Her guide spoke a few words in the indigenous language, and soon an elderly woman approached, taking Lucas in her arms. With firm gestures, she indicated they should follow her to a larger hut in the center of the village. "My name will be Rajara," the man finally said as they walked. "You stay until boy heals." The shaman's hut was dark and fragrant, filled with hanging herbs. The white-haired old man examined Lucas, prepared an infusion of bitter leaves, and made the boy drink it. Then he anointed his body with a green paste and wrapped him in fresh leaves. He pointed to a corner of the hut where clean mats lay. "Sleep now," translated Ubirajara. That night, while Lucas slept more peacefully and Tomas curiously explored every corner of the hut, Josefa asked Ubirajara why he had helped her. He remained silent for a long time, looking at the fire. "Strong mother protects cubs. Ticuna respects strength," he finally answered. When morning came, Lucas's fever had subsided. The shaman smiled, satisfied, and said something to Ubirajara, who turned to Josefa. Shaman says, "River spirit accepted boy. Now must stay 3 more moons to thank spirit." Josefa didn't quite understand, but nodded. Ubirajara then led her to his own hut, smaller than the others, away from the center of the village. "You stay here. Help Ubirajara with food, with fire. I help with boys. 3 moons." It was a proposal, not an order. Josefa looked at her children. Lucas was already playing with some seeds on the ground. Tomas was attentively watching the Ticuna boys fishing by the riverbank. For the first time in many days, she felt something like hope. 3 moons, she agreed, and so, without further words, her season in the Ticuna village began, under the silent protection of a man who, like her, knew the weight of solitude. The first days in the Ticuna village were filled with long silences and cautious observations. Josefa learned to make herself useful without asking questions. She woke before dawn, lit the fire, prepared the cassava porridge Ubirajara had taught her to make. The village women studied her from a distance, whispering among themselves when she passed carrying water or hanging clothes. Some frowned, distrustful. Others offered timid smiles. But none really approached her. The boys, on the other hand, adapted with the quickness of childhood. Lucas fully recovered from his fever and now ran through the village following Tomas's footsteps, who had already befriended the fisherman Raioni's children. They learned words in the Ticuna language, tried unknown fruits, and returned to Ubirajara's hut, covered in mud and smiles. On a particularly hot afternoon, as sweat ran down Josefa's back while she wove a mat under the distant guidance of one of the women, she noticed a different figure approaching. It was an elderly woman, with white hair tied in a bun at the top of her head, a thin body but erect posture, and lively eyes that seemed to see beyond the surface of things. She carried a small basket in her hands. "Giandira," she introduced herself in clear Portuguese without an accent. "I was a teacher. I learned your language from missionaries many years ago." She sat down beside Josefa without asking permission and observed her work with the mat. "Good hands. Learn quickly, but you weave like a white woman still, with haste." She took Josefa's hands, correcting the position of her fingers. "Like this. Feel the fiber first. It tells you how it wants to be woven." From the basket she took ripe guavas. She offered one to Josefa. "The shaman told me your story, or what Ubirajara told him. Men talk little, explain even less." She smiled, revealing gums almost without teeth. "There's more, isn't there? In your heart there's a bigger story." Josefa felt something break inside her. Tears came without warning, and long-contained words overflowed. She told of her first husband, a fisherman from Santa Rosa, taken by the waters in a flood when Tomas was only a year old. About how she had to work in Mr. Geronimo's store to survive. About how the farmer's son courted her with promises, got her pregnant and then denied paternity. About the shame she brought to her already fragile family. About the looks from the devout women in church. About the doors that closed. Mr. Geronimo waited until Lucas was born. Then he said a woman like me wasn't fit to work in a decent business. I lost my home, my job, my parents had departed years ago. I had nowhere to go except to follow the river. Yandira listened in silence, offering only nods of understanding. When Josefa finished, she wiped her tears with wrinkled fingers. "The river takes, but the river also brings. It brought you to us." In the following days, Jandira became a constant presence. She always brought something. A fruit, a piece of fish, a medicinal herb, and always left a lesson. She taught Josefa to grind cassava in the mortar to make beiju, to recognize plants that cured stomach aches, to braid the boy's hair in the Ticuna style. "Ubirajara watches you," she commented one morning as they shelled corn together. "He doesn't speak, but he looks, always like this since his woman left." Josefa raised her eyes, surprised. "He was married," Jandira nodded, "to Portira. Strong woman, good hunter. She gave him no children. In the last great drought, when the river ran shallow and fish disappeared, many Ticuna went to work in rubber tapping. Portira went, said she would return with the next flood, but only news of her returned. Fever took her." She paused. "Ubirajara waited 2 whole seasons. Then he put away her things and became a man of few words. Now he speaks only to the river and the forest. Jandira's words helped Josefa understand her host's silence. She began to observe him too. She noticed how he always left the best part of the fish for the boys, how he quietly fixed the toys Thomas broke, how he taught Lucas to identify bird songs. One afternoon, while the boys were sleeping, Josefa found Ubirajara sitting by the riverside, carving a piece of wood. She approached silently and sat beside him. For a long time they remained like this, without words. Then he showed her what he was making, a small boat with meticulous details. "For Tomas," he said. "Boy dreams of big river." Josefa nodded. "He talks about the day he will be a brave fisherman like Ubirajara." A flash of pride passed through the man's eyes, who quickly returned to focusing on his carving. "Why do you live alone so far from the center of the village?" asked Josefa, encouraged by the moment of closeness. Ubirajara took time to answer. When Potira went, others looked at Ubirajara with pity. Man without woman, without children, is like tree without roots for Ticuna, cannot withstand storm. He made a vague gesture toward his isolated hut. "Here only wind hears Ubirajara cry Potira's name at night." A confession made in a low voice, almost a whisper. Josefa felt the weight of those words, the echo of her own loneliness. Without thinking, she touched Ubirajara's rough hand with hers. He didn't pull away. The marked time, 3 moons, was almost over. Lucas now played with the other children as if he had been born there. Tomas followed Ubirajara everywhere, learning to fish, to recognize tracks, to respect the river. Josefa mastered more and more tasks of Ticuna life, weaving, harvesting, food preparation. One morning, while pounding cassava with other women, she heard them discussing in Ticuna. By the tone and the looks in her direction, she understood they were talking about her. Jandira, who supervised the work, intervened with firm words. Then she explained to Josefa, "Village council will meet tomorrow. Shaman wants to talk about you and boys. Agreed time is over. They need to decide." A chill ran down Josefa's spine. "Decide what?" Jandira shrugged. "If you stay or go. Some think white woman in village brings problems. Others..." She hesitated. "Others see how Ubirajara looks at boys, like man who found new roots." That night, while the boys slept, Josefa tried to ask Ubirajara about the council. He confirmed with a nod, but offered no explanations. Instead, he said, "Take boys tomorrow to Jandira's house. Council wants only adults." Then, surprising her, he added, "Don't be afraid. Ticuna respects those who respect river." It was only when she lay down, wrapped in the mat she herself had woven, that Josefa understood what was at stake. It wasn't just a roof over their heads, but a place in the world. For the first time since arriving at the village, she allowed herself to think of the future beyond the next day. She fell asleep with a strange certainty in her chest. Whatever the council's decision, nothing would be as before. The river had already changed its course, silently, as only deep waters know how to do. The council meeting lasted from sunrise to sunset. From Jandira's house, where she played with the boys, Josefa observed the movement in the central hut. Elders entered and left. Voices occasionally rose. Drums sounded at specific moments. Ubirajara remained inside the whole time. "What are they deciding?" asked Tomas, noticing his mother's restlessness. "If we can stay longer," she answered, trying to hide her tension. "I want to stay," declared the boy with the simplicity of childhood. "Ubirajara will teach me to make a big bow when I grow a little more." Lucas, absorbed in drawing with charcoal on a wooden board, raised his eyes. "Home here," he said only, with his few words. Jandira, who was preparing an herbal tea in the corner of the hut, smiled. Children understand faster than adults. For them, home is where there's care, not where they were born. When the sun was already setting, Ubirajara finally appeared. His face, normally impassive, looked more grave. He signaled for Josefa to follow him. "Come," he said only. "Council wants to talk." Josefa's heart raced. Jandira took the children by the hand, promising to show them the constellations when it got completely dark. "Go, face it with your head held high," she whispered to Josefa. The council hut was illuminated by torches. In the center, sitting in a circle, were the village elders, men and women with white hair and faces marked by time. The shaman occupied an elevated seat, decorated with feathers and painted symbols. Next to him, an empty chair. Ubirajara led Josefa to the center of the circle, and then moved away, sitting among the other men. The shaman spoke at length in Ticuna. Then one of the elder women, whom Josefa recognized as Iracema, the village midwife, stood up and translated. Shaman says river spirit spoke. White woman came brought by water as gift and as test. Ticuna needs to decide if it accepts gift, if it passes test. She pointed to the empty chair. Sit, listen, then speak. Josefa obeyed, feeling all eyes on her. A middle-aged man, whom she knew to be the chief of the hunters, stood up. He spoke in an exalted tone, pointing to the village exit. Iracema translated, Tupa says whites always bring problems. First they come humble, then many come. They take land, take river, bring diseases. Ticuna village is already small, cannot become smaller. Others spoke, some in favor, some against her staying. Josefa listened to everything in silence, her trembling hands hidden under the simple dress she wore. When everyone finished, the shaman struck his staff on the ground 3 times and looked directly at her. Now you speak, translated Iracema. Why should Ticuna let white women and children stay? Josefa took a deep breath. The words she had prepared during the day seemed inadequate now. She opted for the simple truth. I have nowhere to go, she began. My people rejected me because I had 2 children from different men. One left me widowed, the other abandoned me. For them I am shame. She paused. Here I learned that a child is not shame, but future. I learned that food is shared, that the river is respected, that hands work for all. She looked at Ubirajara, who kept his eyes lowered. I don't want to take anything from the Ticuna. I want to give work, respect, gratitude. My children already speak Ticuna words, already know river spirits. If we stay, they will grow honoring 2 worlds. The shaman asked another question, which Iracema translated. And when white men come looking for you, when they know white woman lives with Indians, what will you tell them? Josefa hadn't thought about that. The possibility of being sought seemed so remote. I will say I chose to be here, that nobody forced me, that I found respect where before there was only contempt. The shaman nodded slowly. Then he spoke at length with the other elders. Finally he rose with the help of his staff and approached Josefa. He placed his wrinkled hand on her head and spoke some words in Ticuna. Shaman says, 3 moons of test are over, translated Irasma. Now begins time of proof. Next full moon, council decides final. Until then, white woman and children continue under Ubirajara's protection. When they left the council hut, night had already fallen completely. Stars shone in a cloudless sky. Ubirajara walked beside Josefa in silence to Jandira's house, where they collected the sleeping boys. What happens now? She asked while carrying Lucas in her arms. Ticuna watches. Judges. Next full moon decides. He picked up Tomas, who didn't even stir, accustomed to the strong arms that had carried him so many times. It's not fair, murmured Josefa, to judge us like this, as if we were different, completed Ubirajara, with a rare display of irony. Ticuna knows how it is to be judged for being different. The next morning, Josefa noticed the change. The women who before only observed her from a distance now called her to participate in all activities. Net fishing, fruit harvesting, preparation of dyes. It was as if she were being tested in every skill. The men, in turn, began to include Tomas in more activities, teaching him to use small tools, to identify poisonous plants, to follow tracks. Even Lucas, so small, received special attention from the older children, who seemed to have been given the task of teaching him to speak more words in Ticuna. Jandira explained, when Josefa questioned her, Council wants to see if you can really become part of the village, if you can learn, respect, contribute. And she added with a smile, and if Ubirajara can really be a father. The mention of Ubirajara made Josefa blush. In recent weeks, something had changed between them. The shared silence was no longer just resignation, but a form of communication of their own. He had begun to teach her words in Ticuna, the names of fish, trees, stars. She, in exchange, told him stories of the world beyond the river, of the cities she had known, of the books she had read in school before abandoning it to work. One night, while the boys slept, Ubirajara showed her a small carved wooden box. Inside was a necklace of red and black seeds. It was Patira's, he said. Ticuna woman receives it when she agrees to share hut with man. Josefa touched the seeds delicately. It's very beautiful. Ubirajara closed the box. One day, perhaps, another woman will wear it." The look they exchanged said more than any words could. The days passed, and Josefa dedicated herself earnestly to proving her worth. She learned to weave baskets to perfection, to prepare traditional foods, to sing some of the ritual songs. The boys flourished. Tomas already spoke Ticuna almost fluently. Lucas identified medicinal plants with surprising precision for his age. But not everything was harmony. Tupa, the chief of hunters, continued to look at her with suspicion. One afternoon, when she was washing clothes in the river, he approached. "Clever white woman," he said in broken Portuguese. "Deceives Ubirajara, deceives council, but Tupa knows. White woman wants Ticuna land." Josefa felt her blood freeze. "I don't want land, I just want peace for my children." He laughed, a harsh sound. "Today, children. Tomorrow, relatives. Then gold miners, loggers." He pointed to the forest. "Tupa has seen before, knows how it ends." He moved away, leaving her trembling. That night, she told Ubirajara about the encounter. For the first time, she saw fury in his eyes. "Tupa does not speak for Ticuna," he said with a contained voice. "Speaks from fear." But Josefa realized that Tupa's words had planted a seed. What if he was right? What if her presence really brought problems to the village? The moon grew in the sky, approaching fullness. The council's final decision was getting closer. A growing restlessness took hold of the village and of Josefa's heart. With each passing day, she felt more Ticuna and less foreign. But would it be enough? On the eve of the full moon, as Ubirajara taught Tomas how to tie a fishing net, a shout cut through the village air. "Boat! White men's boat!" Everyone ran to the riverbank. In the distance, a motorboat approached, larger than the usual canoes, with several people aboard. Josefa felt her legs weaken when she recognized at the bow the bulky figure of Mr. Geronimo. The boat docked under the tense gaze of the Ticuna. Besides Mr. Geronimo, a uniformed man disembarked, Corporal Menezes from the river police, and 3 more men whom Josefa recognized as merchants from Santa Rosa. Ubirajara positioned himself at the front of the Ticuna group, with the shaman and Tupa at his side. Instinctively, Josefa pulled the boys behind her. "We are looking for Josefa Alves dos Santos and her 2 minor children," announced the corporal, consulting a paper. "We have information that they are being held in this village against their will." Mr. Geronimo advanced, his face red with heat and indignation. "There's the wretched woman with the children." He pointed directly at her. 3 months missing, and the people of Santa Rosa thinking she had died in the river. Then news came that an Indian had taken a white woman with a child. The Ticuna remained impassive, but Josefa perceived the growing tension. Tupa had his hand on his machete, and some young men already held bows. The shaman raised his staff, asking for calm. Ubirajara stepped forward. "Woman not taken. Woman was healed, boy was sick." Corporal Menezes looked from Ubirajara to Josefa. "Is this true, ma'am? Are you and your children here of your own free will?" Before Josefa could answer, Mr. Geronimo interrupted. "What free will? She's bewitched by these Indians. Look at her, dressed like them, her hair braided that way. This is kidnapping. It's corruption of minors." Tomas, who had learned to understand Portuguese very well in his 5 years of life, clung tighter to his mother's skirt. "I don't want to go with bad man, Mom," he whispered. Lucas, sensing the tension, began to cry. The corporal raised his hand, asking for silence. "Mrs. Josefa, I need to hear from you. Are you being held here against your will?" The question hung in the air like a sentence. Josefa looked at Ubirajara, at Jandira, at the other Ticuna women, who, despite initial differences, now treated her as one of them. She looked at her children, who had found in the village what Santa Rosa had never given them: acceptance, freedom, belonging. "No," she answered firmly. "We came to the village because my youngest son was sick. We stayed because we were well received. No one forced us to do anything." Mr. Geronimo let out a bitter laugh. "Well received, after we expelled you for being a woman of improper conduct?" "Tell another story, Josefa." The words hit her like a physical blow. Corporal Menezes frowned. "Is this true? You were expelled from Santa Rosa?" Josefa raised her chin. "I was. For being a young widow, for having 2 children from different fathers, for not accepting the proposals that Mr. Geronimo made to me when I worked in his business." A murmur ran through the group from Santa Rosa. Mr. Geronimo's face contorted with rage. Liar! Tramp! I'll sue you for slander. He advanced a few steps, threatening. That's when Ubirajara interposed himself, his body tense as a bowstring. Don't touch woman. Don't scare children. Mr. Geronimo backed away, but did not quiet down. And what are you to her, Indian? The new father of the children. All of Santa Rosa knows she's no good, that she gives herself to anyone. The insult crossed the air like a poisoned arrow. Ubirajara remained motionless, but his eyes darkened dangerously. It was the shaman who intervened, speaking in Tikuna. Iratsema translated for the corporal. Shaman says, visit over, take men back to boat. Woman and children are Tikuna council matter now. The corporal hesitated. It's not that simple. There is a formal complaint of abduction of minors. I need to take all three with me to give a statement in Tefe. He pointed to Josefa and the boys. Afterward, if everything is in order, they can return. Josefa felt her blood freeze. Tefe was days away, and she knew very well that once in the hands of the authorities, she would hardly return. Tomas began to tremble, clinging to her legs. Lucas was openly crying now. At that moment, Jandira stepped forward. Until then silent, the old teacher straightened to her full height, looking the corporal in the eyes. I am Jandira Macedo da Silva. I was a teacher in Manaus for 30 years before returning to my village of origin. I know your laws well. Her voice was clear, articulate, without the slightest trace of an accent. The corporal seemed surprised. You are Tikuna, educated by missionaries, trained in teaching, but Tikuna. She pointed to one of the men from the boat. That one, Benito, was my student in Manaus. He knows who I am. The man nodded, embarrassed. It's true, Corporal. Teacher Jandira was respected by everyone. Jandira continued. Your laws say that no child can be removed from a safe environment without proof of mistreatment or danger. Look at the boys. Are they healthy? Are they clean? Do they have marks of violence? The corporal looked at the children, then at Josefa. No, but then there is no legal justification to take them. As for the mother, she is of legal age, has full capacity to decide where she wants to live. Unless there is a specific judicial warrant, you cannot force her to accompany you. Mr. Geronimo advanced again. This is absurd. This Indian thinks she understands the law? Corporal, do your job. The corporal seemed undecided. That's when Tupa, surprisingly, also spoke up. Tikuna doesn't want trouble with white man, but Tikuna protects who council accepted. He turned to Josefa, and for the first time, his gaze contained no hostility. White woman and children stay until council decides. Then if need to go, go by own will. The shaman struck his staff on the ground, confirming Tupa's words. All the Tikuna present, men, women, and even children, took a step forward, forming a protective circle around Josefa and her children. Corporal Meneses looked at the scene, pondered for a moment, and finally nodded. Very well. I won't force a situation that could end badly for everyone. He turned to Mr. Geronimo. There is no evidence of abduction or mistreatment. Mrs. Josefa states she is here of her own free will, and the Tikuna confirm that she and the children are under the protection of the tribal council. He took a paper from his pocket. I will record her statement right here and send it to the sheriff. If he wants to proceed, let him send an officer with a specific judicial warrant. Mr. Geronimo seemed not to believe what he was hearing. This is an outrage. Are you on the Indian side? The corporal remained firm. I am on the side of the law, sir, and the law says I cannot remove children from a safe environment without evidence of danger. He pointed to the boat. Now, I suggest we return. Night is falling, and this stretch of the river is dangerous in the dark. Reluctantly, Mr. Geronimo and the other men returned to the boat. Before departing, the merchant cast a final hate-filled look at Josefa. This doesn't end here. You'll regret having embarrassed us like this. The engine roared, and the boat moved away, leaving only ripples in the calm water of the river. The tension in the village took time to dissipate. The Tikuna remained on alert, posting lookouts on the riverbank. That night no one slept peacefully. Josefa remained awake, the children clutching her like frightened cubs. Ubirajara sat at the hut's door, his bow within reach. They will return, said Josefa, breaking the silence of the early morning. Mr. Geronimo doesn't give up easily. He's a vain man, doesn't accept being contradicted. Ubirajara nodded. Tikuna knows. That's why council meets tomorrow, with full moon. Needs to decide before boat returns. The next morning, the entire village was in motion. The council hut was prepared with special care. Fires were lit, drums positioned. Josefa realized it wouldn't be an ordinary meeting. It would be a ritual. Jandira came to get her early. "Come, we need to prepare you and the boys." In her hut, with the help of other women, Jandira painted Josefa's face with anato and jenipap in designs that represented the river and the forest. She dressed her in a dyed cotton tunic and adorned her hair with colorful feathers. The boys received similar treatment, with paintings that symbolized protection and belonging. "What will happen?" asked Josefa, nervous. Jandira smiled. "Council has already decided. Now is time to make it official." When the sun reached its highest point, everyone gathered in the central hut. The elders sat in a circle with the shaman in a prominent position. Drums began to sound, first slowly, then in a more intense rhythm. The shaman rose, supported by his staff, and began to sing in Tikuna, an ancient melody that spoke of rivers that meet, of trees that grow in new lands, of birds that build nests far from where they were born. Josefa, with Lucas in her arms and Tomas at her side, was led to the center of the circle. Ubirajara was there, dressed in ceremonial adornments, his chest painted with symbols of protection. The shaman spoke at length in Tikuna. Then he took Josefa's hand and placed it on Ubirajara's. With a gesture, he indicated that Tomas and Lucas should approach. When the four were united, the shaman poured river water over their intertwined hands. "Water that separated now unites," translated Irasima. "Woman who came by river now belongs to river. Children who came by river now are children of river. Man who crossed river now has new bank." Jandira approached, bringing the necklace of red and black seeds that Josefa had seen in Ubirajara's box. The shaman took it and placed it around her neck. "Josefa now is Janaina, woman of great river, Tikuna by choice, not by birth." Tomas and Lucas received similar small necklaces. "Boys now are Rui and Kawe, sons of warrior Ubirajara and woman Janaina." Tears flowed freely down Josefa's face. Now Janaina. Ubirajara, normally so restrained, had shining eyes. Without words, he took from a leaf wrapping another gift, a small headdress made especially for Tomas. Now Rui. The boy received it with reverence, placing it on his head with pride. For Lucas, now Kawe, there was a seed rattle, a ritual instrument of the youngest apprentices. The shaman raised his staff, and the entire village stood up. The singing intensified, and soon everyone was dancing in a circle, celebrating the new family that was forming. The next day, as Josefa had predicted, the boat returned. This time it brought not only Mr. Geronimo and the corporal, but also a justice official from Tefe, with official documents. When they docked, they found the entire Tikuna village lined up on the bank. At the front, Ubirajara, the shaman, Tupa, and other warriors. Next to them, Josefa, now Janaina, with the boys, all dressed and painted in the Tikuna manner. The justice official disembarked, visibly uncomfortable. "I have here a warrant to investigate the situation of Mrs. Josefa Alves dos Santos and her minor children, Tomas and Lucas." Mr. Geronimo smiled, triumphant. Jandira stepped forward, once again assuming the role of intermediary. "I am Jandira Macedo da Silva, retired teacher and member of the Tikuna Council. The woman you are looking for is now called Janaina. She was formally adopted by the Tikuna tribe in a ceremony held yesterday, according to our ancestral traditions, recognized by the federal constitution and by Funai." She took a document from a straw bag and handed it to the official. "This is the record of the ceremony, with the signature of the village chief and the nearest Funai representative, who arrived this morning especially for the event." The official examined the document, surprised. "This is irregular. One cannot simply change identity." Jandira smiled. "It's not a change, sir. It's recognition. Indigenous peoples have the right to incorporate new members into their community, as long as there is mutual consent." She pointed to a man who had just disembarked from a smaller canoe, docked further ahead. "That is Mr. Paulo Mendes, regional representative of Funai. He can confirm the legality of the procedure." The justice official seemed increasingly uncomfortable. He checked the papers again, spoke briefly with the Funai representative, and finally addressed Josefa. Mrs. Janaina, I need to hear directly from you. Was this decision made of your own free will? Josefa stepped forward, the seed necklace gleaming in the sun. It was. I chose to stay with my children in the Ticuna village where we found respect and safety. I chose to unite my life with Ubirajara's, who welcomed us when no one else did. Her gaze met Mr. Geronimo's. In Santa Rosa, we were shame. Here, we are family. The official nodded slowly. I understand. And the miners? Do they understand what is happening? Tomas, with his new headdress, stepped forward. My name is Rui now. I will be a warrior like my father Ubirajara. His childish voice carried a surprising conviction. I don't want to go back to the place where Mom cried every night. Even Lucas, so small, shook his rattle and said in his limited language, Kawe stays. The official put away the papers. Well, it seems there isn't much more to be done here. The lady and her children are visibly well and have made their choice. He turned to Mr. Geronimo. I'm sorry, but there is no legal basis for intervention. The merchant exploded. This is absurd. A farce. You're going to let this woman raise Brazilian children as savages? The Funai representative intervened. Be careful with your words, sir. Ethnic offenses are a federal crime. Mr. Geronimo fell silent, but his gaze overflowed with hatred. When the boat departed for the last time, Josefa, now forever Janaina, felt an immense weight leave her shoulders. Ubirajara placed his hand on her shoulder, a rare gesture of public affection. Now we are us, family. That night, under the full moon that illuminated the river like a silver path, the Ticuna village celebrated. Drums sounded until dawn, telling the story of the woman who came by the waters and found her true bank. Years later, when travelers passed through the region, they heard about the healer Janaina, who knew the secrets of the forest plants and of men's hearts. They told that she lived with a respected Ticuna warrior and 2 sons, a skilled hunter named Rui and a young shaman in training named Kawe. They said that her hut, although built in the traditional way, had a small garden where medicinal herbs from 2 worlds grew, and that on festival nights when the community gathered around the fire, it was she who told the most beautiful stories, about rivers that separate and rivers that unite, about losses that make way for encounters, about the true meaning of belonging. If this story touched your heart, be sure to subscribe to the channel to follow more narratives like this one, which remind us that family goes far beyond blood. It's about who embraces us when we need it most. Leave your like and share in the comments which moment moved you the most in this journey along the banks of the Solimois River.